I moved from New York City to rural America. And when I moved, I couldn't even get overnight mail. They only guaranteed it 3 days. My friends in the city were like, we're going to come pack you up and bring you back to civilization.
Welcome to Rural, Conversations on the State of Rural America. My guest today is Ebony Alexander, who had a lot to say about land.
Here we go.
Tell us who you are and what you do.
I am Ebony Alexander, Executive Director of the Black Farmland Trust. The BFLT is one of the nation's only land trusts dedicated to the preservation and protection of African American and other historically underserved populations' land assets.
Let's jump right in. What is it about land?
People always say, well, how do you make land human? You capture the stories, the history of the land. How did your family come to own this land? Where did they farm? Where did they kill the animals? Where did the children play? And every generation has a story.
I asked Ebony to share her story.
I live on family land. My great-grandmother was born there, about 500 yards from my back door. She was born enslaved. But from her on up, I know the stories of things that happened on the land. I cut my driveway at a tree that my father, as a kid, was notorious for climbing and scaring people as they walked down the street at night because it was dark and they had no electricity. That was his big joke. They run up to the church, climb up the bell tower, and put on sheets and hang out and pretend to be ghosts. In my generation, I have cousins who grew up on the land. My grandfather had a sawmill, and they used to play in the sawdust. And they would come home and get in trouble because it's unsafe to play in the sawdust. But they played anyway. I always call them Genius A and Genius B. And then they decided that if they stripped naked and played in the sawdust, and then brush the sawdust off of each other and then go back home, their parents would know that they played in the sawdust pile, and subsequently they didn't get punished. My cousin always talks about how sawdust bites. So that was that generation's story. And then my grandson and his cousin next door decided that they would have a clubhouse in the woods. And my lawn furniture kept disappearing. I couldn't figure out where in the world it was going. And then, as tradition is, we walk through the woods to cut a tree down for Christmas every year. I noticed my lawn furniture and I looked at him and I'm like, so you got any idea how this got here? He's like, oh yeah, this is our clubhouse. He said, don't you know every time you come home and you're mad because the router in your bedroom window is in your bedroom window and it's up high? Well, if we put it all the way up there, then we can get signal and we can play on our gadgets under the tree. So every family has those stories about their land, and those are the stories that connect you to the land, and those are the stories that make the land human for you.
I understand. But how do you afford it without destroying it? I asked her about her mission with the Black Farmland Trust.
We see land as an asset. It should be an asset for current and future generations. If it's a performing asset, you're less likely to sell it and get rid of it. And if you make your land human, you're not going to get rid of it. It's like your children. They get on your nerves, but you never get rid of them.
So what are some of the advantages of rural environments, maybe versus the suburbs or, the city, Baltimore?
Quiet. There's peace. There's nature. You see how the world works. You can really see the sunrise and the sunset. Watch the trees come to life every spring. And then we get a good rain. All of a sudden, there's all this foliage. There are leaves everywhere. Being able to live more harmoniously. You can breathe. You can't do that in a city. You don't have all of the amenities. Now I miss them. I can walk around my yard, my entire yard in my pajamas, and no one will see me. I can set things out on my back deck that will be there 6 months from now if I don't move them. I don't worry about, there's just a peace that's the quiet. It's their inner peace. That's not for everybody.
Well, I watched a documentary a while back on trees, and this was new to me. Trees apparently release aerosols, and the aerosols that they release are very similar to endorphins. I knew I felt good walking in the woods, but I didn't really understand it. I thought maybe it was the quiet or the smells.
There's a lot of research now on walking in the woods, walking along trails. It brings your blood pressure down. In the wintertime, when I know that the snakes are gone and the ticks are gone, I'll walk in the woods.
Have you always felt this way?
I'm one who came to the land. I have cousins who grew up there. Even their perspective is different. They have a different appreciation than I do. And they think the things that I appreciate, they just kind of look at me sideways. They've had it all their lives. They've always had it. The fact that I can stand at my kitchen sink, and if it's an active day, I can watch foxes, rabbits, deer, and an occasional bear all in the same day. It's like, where else could you do this but rural America?
We're seeing a constant drain of the population from these rural areas. If rural areas are so great, why are people leaving them?
I fear for rural America.
What is your fear?
Another 50 years, it'll be gone.
Why do you think it's in decline? Why, we talk about the hollowing out of rural America, which is my fear and worry too. And so I'm asking everybody, why do you think this is happening?
There are a couple of things. I don't think it's a single cause. Rural America supports the lifestyle of urban America.
How so?
You don't see trash dumps on Fifth Avenue or Constitution Avenue or Broad Street in Richmond. They're in rural America where the landfills are, where all of the power grid is in rural America. The highways, the interstates are in rural America. We lose farmland so that we can put more cars on the road that create more toxic fumes that kill the environment. Rural America pays the price for you to be able to walk down the street in Vegas at 2:00 and have bright lights.
Yes, they're paying the price, but they're not getting paid enough.
Well, and
that's
they
part
don't
of the
get paid
reason
at
why.
all.
Right, exactly. And that's part of the reason why people are leaving rural areas. Who's going to work for free? When we do workshops, I'll say, okay, give me a show of hands. How many of you out there would go to work for free? Come on, let me say, oh, nobody? Well, that's what you're asking your farmers that raise your table food to do.
When I grew up, there were certain things that were seasonal foods. We don't have seasonal foods anymore. Everything is just year round. And I think that there's some loss to us as a society, because we don't know how to wait.
No, it's true.
You used to wait for the grapes to get ready, the apples or the oranges or cantaloupe. You always waited. There was a season for that. Now you have cantaloupe with your breakfast on Christmas morning. How is that possible? Because we don't know how to. We're just so connected. And I'm not advocating that we go back to a different time, but I think that we have to be more intentional and understand more going forward the impact that it has, not just on our little tiny piece of the world, but on the whole globe, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Raspberries in January, really?
Yeah.
Next, we turn the conversation to the pandemic.
I think that the pandemic, more than anything in recent time, brought home the fact that we need to appreciate our small acreage farms. How do we save rural America? Pay our farmers a decent wage. We pay taxes for corporate farms, and we don't get the same benefit for our small acreage farms. I'm a big advocate of small acreage farms. During the pandemic, we know that it was the small acreage farms that responded immediately at the beginning when everybody was afraid that they were going to starve to death. Because what we saw on television was corporate farms turning beans and potatoes back in because the supply chain had been interrupted. We were seeing dairymen dumping milk, farmers crush eggs because they couldn't get. You didn't see one small farmer dumping anything.
No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right.
And what the small farmer did, because they're small, they're flexible, they pivoted on a dime, they were able to turn around and provide food to their local communities. There's no reason for me to have to eat a watermelon that came from California or South America. I live in America. We grew watermelons for years. What happened?
They didn't get paid enough for them.
Exactly. So I can go now buy a $6 watermelon in the Food Lion. I look at everything now. Where
did it come from?
Yeah, from seafood to vegetables and fruit, your meat. We've got to learn to appreciate our small acreage farmers. We've got to learn to appreciate our agricultural workers.
Why?
This is an industry. This is highly skilled work. When you can pay more for a tractor than most people pay for their houses, that doesn't mean that, this is unskilled labor. You have to have certain skills. You can come into it and learn and grow, but if you want that farm to be productive, you've got to have skilled people that are doing the work.
And
we
the
need to be
stereotype
able-
is the dumb farmer, the
The
Green
dumb
Acres,
farmers,
Beverly Hills,
right.
Petticoat, all of that.
Yeah, and we've got to stop doing that. I have friends who come to visit me just so they can buy vegetables around my area, and then they take them back home with them and can them for the winter. So people are starting. I'm a boomer, but the next generation behind me and the generation behind that are more concerned about what goes into their body, how it was grown, who grew it, and was it done in a fair way, in a clean way? Was it done in a safe way? Did people get paid a proper amount for their labor? So I think that we're starting to see some change. But on the other hand, we're also starting to see huge acreage being purchased by wealthy people for hobby farms, for investment farms, people buying huge amounts of land now for future carbon markets. All of those things put rural America at risk.
One of the things that I talk about is that we're losing 100,000 small farms in America a year. The average age of the farmer is 58. Farmer suicide's on the rise. There's nobody coming up behind them. America supports their agriculture the least of any first world country in the world. And we used to spend 43% of our income on food, and now we spend between 7 and 9%.
I asked Ebony about the people moving into rural areas and their expectations and challenges.
If you don't like what's in your town, don't move to my town and bring those dislikes with you. So if you think that there's too much congestion, but you need to have a Starbucks, we don't need a Starbucks. We make our own coffee. Rural America's at risk of wealthy people wanting to use rural America for investment purposes or for hobby farms or because they needed to offload some money. People who grow our food can't make a living. Most farmers work 2 jobs. When I say farmer, that's who I'm talking about, small acreage farmer. They can't make a living. They have to have somebody that works an outside job so that they can have health benefits. Or they work 2 jobs themselves. They farm during daylight hours and then work 3rd shift and then come home, get a quick nap, and then go back out. The next generation needs to see light at the end of the tunnel. If you watch your parents scrape every dime together to keep the farm going, to keep you fed, even though you live on a farm, then you might decide, when my time comes, I'm out. I'm not doing this. I can go live in the suburbs. I can go work here. So we don't have a good bench or a pipeline of young people who want to come back to the farm. The ones that are just hitting their 20s now are the ones that are going to be more concerned about I think they're more concerned about the environment. They're more concerned about social justice, economic justice, environmental justice. Those are things that resonate with them. If I had my way, I would probably go around and put permanent easements on all of rural America. We've seen cornfields and tobacco fields and pastures turn into Walmarts and strip malls or housing development. We've never seen a single housing development or a strip mall turn back into a farm. It's a one-way street. It never comes back. Because once you put that infrastructure in, what do you do with it?
I see solar farms popping up all over productive farmland in our rural area. Couldn't we use some of these areas for solar farms?
Let's put solar panels on our houses. Mm-hmm. Let's put them on our barns. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that we have enough productive, rich soil left to lose to 25-year contract for solar panels.
And Ebony, you were talking earlier about the young people, and this is what I fear some of the challenges we have with young people. Even if they are interested in it and they want to do it,
they can't afford it.
They can't afford it. They got to buy the equipment, the land, all of that, and then they don't know how to do it. It's not like you can have an interest in it and to go out there and do it successfully. It takes years to learn how to be a good farmer. That's part of that stereotype of the dumb farmer. Oh, I can go out there, and people do that all the time. They'll buy a piece of land, they'll think, oh, I can do this, and they do it for maybe 5 years, and they realize They're not making any money. Their place is a mess. They're absolutely worn out. So why in the heck are they going to continue that?
And then you see some old guy walk in and reach down, rub the soil between his fingers and say, go get me so-and-so and so-and-so. Or get some water over here. This is too dry. My crop's not going to grow. That's that experience. It's like your grandmother and your great-grandmother who baked cakes without a measuring cup or measuring spoons. They just put stuff in their hand and then it turned out.
Let me ask you about some of the work you're doing with heir property rights. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what effect that has and why?
Heirs property is where you have multiple generations own the land. It's usually because the person whose name that the deed is in died without a will. Then it passed to heirs. Heirs follow, for the most part, the bloodline, but there's some other ways that people can become heirs. In the African American community, it is one of the leading causes of land loss today because the property is generational. People purchase land out of slavery, they homesteaded, people bought land in the early 1900s, and then they died and they didn't have wills, but their children stayed on, and then their children. Because it follows the bloodline, it can get very convoluted depending on how many generations you have. We have families that we work with that there's 6 branches on that tree that we've got to go through. The importance of heirs property is that people always find a way to be unscrupulous and to cheat people out of their land assets. One of the programs that we offer at the BFLT is called the African American Land Ethic, designed specifically to help people understand, African Americans in particular, understand the relationship that we have with the land. When we were doing the R&D on this particular program, a lot of times we would hear from younger generations that when my time comes, I'm selling the land. I don't want any part of it. I didn't grow up on the land. I don't have a relationship to it. I don't understand it. I just want my money so I can go. And it goes back to slavery, sharecropping, USDA. And one of the things that I say to people about slavery is that's somebody else's crazy. That's not our crazy. There was nobody standing on the shores of West Africa waving, saying, hey, come take me, chain me to the bottom of a ship, bring me across an ocean, drop me off in a country where nobody speaks my language. The culture is different. The foods are different. And then treat me less than you would treat a horse or a cow for more than 200 years. That was not our crazy. That was somebody else's. And what we cannot do is allow that crazy to separate us from our land assets. For someone to come out of slavery and to come into freedom and be able to acquire land is an incredible thing. One day you're owned by somebody like a horse or a cow. The next day you're free and you own nothing. Not even the clothes on your back are yours. You have no education. All you know is agriculture. But it's a spiritual connection also. So for many people to see how their ancestors were able to acquire land, it is such a dishonor to those ancestors to let that land go. We don't know how they acquired it in many cases, what the indignities were that they had to go through to get it. We know that a lot of land that was purchased by African Americans was the worst land. Don't let anybody ever tell you you have bad land. There's no such thing as bad land. If you think that there's bad land, there's a little place down on the coast of South Carolina called Hilton Head. That was bad land. You can't afford to go to sleep there at night. You can't afford to buy land there now. And that was land that enslaved people developed and cultivated that they don't own anymore. With the land ethic, it's designed to make the next generation understand the value of the land, the history that we have had cultivating land.
The ancestors of the African Americans.
And to the indigenous people.
And to the indigenous people.
Whose land it was before we all got here.
Exactly.
When we look at what's killing rural, there's so many things that are killing rural America. We might not be able to protect it all, but if we can just start protecting more of it.
We're protecting our farm with a conservation easement.
Conservation easements are a wonderful thing, but conservation easements haven't been popular in African American community for whatever reason. I have my beliefs, but
I would love to hear more.
And in addition to feeding us, it's also providing carbon capture, mental health, places for people to exercise safely. So there are all these things that rural America does.
How do we keep the virtue, history, and culture of rural America?
It's incumbent upon all of us, but it's particularly incumbent upon our leadership, educators and political leadership, to stop promoting this notion that people who live in rural America are dumb and country bumpkins.
Stereotypes hurt.
Some of the smartest people that you ever meet live in rural America. Some of the most educated people that you ever meet will live in rural America. We've got to stop promoting the stereotype, because in the end, it doesn't benefit any of us. It doesn't benefit the rural America. It doesn't benefit urban America. And it also doesn't benefit the society as a large, because we have this misconception about some of the most productive, hardest working people in our cultures. We take so much for granted here in this country that we don't learn to appreciate what we have, and we feel entitled to everything. And we're not. We're not. We came from the earth, we go back to the earth. So the earth is part of us, whether we like it or not. We can pretend, we're their superior beings. And no, not. We live in such a fast-paced world that we miss the beauty of the world. And then we try to recreate it. And we need those counterbalances. We need urban America. We just don't need to be urban America to be so greedy. You don't have to suck up all of the natural resources.
So I asked Ebony, what can our sisters and brother in urban areas do to help?
You got places in the urban America where the buildings are vacant. It would make more sense to me to rehab some vacant urban areas than it is to take 2,000 acres of prime farmland, which can feed consistently hundreds of people, versus having this building continue to decay and collapse.
And I think those are great suggestions. And my next question for you was, do you have any ideas for how we stabilize rural areas? But let me say one thing. It's all economics. If we could pay laborers $30 an hour and give them health insurance, we'd have people that love to work outside and work with their hands more willing to come out here and do this. If we could pay farmers a living wage so they wouldn't have to work 2 jobs and they wouldn't have to look somewhere else for health insurance, we wouldn't be losing so much farmland.
I agree with that. When you start to look at where your food comes from, one of our clients is a prawn farmer, freshwater prawns. Used to be a tobacco farmer, participated in the tobacco buyout. He's over in North Carolina, took the money from that and reinvented himself as a freshwater prawn producer. Now, I was a little raising prawns in the middle of North Carolina, not on the coast, but I'm a convert. The joke between the landowner and myself, we have a conservation easement on that property as well. That farm will always, to quote the owner, when we went to closing, he said, "I can lay my dead bones down in peace and rest because I know that my land will always feed people." That was all he wanted. The other thing I didn't say about what's happening to rural America. So when we have people who buy hobby farms, when we have people who buy the farm and then knock down the farmhouse and then put the McMansion up, 10,000 square foot house for 3 people to live in. When we do that, it creates a tax burden because now the taxes go up. So the farmer who's trying to keep his farm operational has to compete tax-wise with somebody who probably doesn't even live in the house, and they push the taxes up. And then with the utilities, we have all of the wires and the substations, but our utilities tend to cost more than urban areas because it doesn't have the same density to get it from point A to point B. So we pay more for it. They pay less for it, but we've lost farmland. We've lost, in some cases, health because of where they are and what those stations emit. And we lose part of our culture, our way of life. There's a very distinct culture in rural America. I don't care whether you're in Vermont or Georgia. There's a very distinct culture in rural America. You're a Texan by birth. You know that there are a lot of similarities between rural Texas and rural Virginia.
Rural North Dakota.
I have a friend from North Carolina up in Asheville who used to say, the one thing you can always tell a good farmer. And I'm like, how is that? And she said, because they're always going to have a couple bales of chicken wire, because we can fix anything with chicken wire and duct tape.
And WD-40.
Now, I'm a big fan of WD-40.
Me too. I love my WD-40.
I ask her thoughts on answers to some of these challenges.
What would you like to see rural America look like, say, 50 years from now?
I would like to see rural America have a beautiful mix of wooded lands, trees, forests. I'd like to see small working farms. I'd like to see old-fashioned fruit stands and vegetable stands at the end of driveways. I'd like to see clean, safe, affordable housing for people in rural America, a sense of community that we don't have anymore. I guess I'd like to see a little bit more humanity. I think rural America has much to teach the rest of the world because we haven't lost it completely. We help each other. We help our neighbor. If you were driving down the road and you saw someone stopped on the side of the road, the car was broken down in rural America and it's one of your neighbors, you're going to stop and say, can I help you? Do you need me to go get something? You're not going to ride past and look the other way. There's just a certain amount of humanity that comes with rural America that we've lost in other places. I'd like to see us be a kinder people, living more harmoniously. We like to think that we have power, but if you can figure out how to stop the sun from rising in the east and setting in the west every night, then tell me about your power. Otherwise, just sit down and go with the flow.
I'm afraid that by moving away from the natural world, we've lost so much.
We can learn from the trees. We can learn from the grass. We can learn from watching the animals, how they behave. Animals kill other animals for food, for survival. They don't kill each other for sport. I pray that rural America will still be here. I am very worried about the survival. Just so much encroachment. So what does rural America offer? It offers you an opportunity. You can live in urban America, but visit. And be able to walk, visit our parks. Don't disrespect them. Don't disrespect our woodlands. Don't bring your trash and dump it in our open spaces because it looks like a field. You know, one of the things that angers me is, people say, well, the farms aren't pretty. And I know farmers who have maybe 5 or 6 broken tractors. They take pieces off of this one and put it on that one, and they keep it moving. Every farmer that you know has a barn full of parts because we don't waste.
And they can fix anything.
We never had a repairman come to our house until, I was in my 20s. It was a washing machine. If the pipe burst, Daddy fixed it. I learned how to solder. You can remember the old flaps on the toilet and after you jiggle it for a month and it still doesn't work, then you got to change it. I know how to do that.
The rubber thing.
Yes, the flapper thing. Yeah, because where I grew up, my father had a rule when you started driving, you had to demonstrate to him that you could change a tire because he was not going to get out of his bed to come change a tire. So if you couldn't change the tires, you couldn't drive.
I'm going to ask you one more question. Any advice you want to give to help stem that hollowing out of rural America? I mean, what is our call to action? What is it that we need to communicate to maybe people that don't even have a clue? I know. Well, see, and me, I always go back to economics, support your local farmer, pay more for your
food. I'd say go get a book.
Pressure your legislators to have more government support.
I'll go back to read. Understand how government works. Understand that you have assets. Everything you own is an asset. From the cup you drank your coffee out of this morning to the land to your car, it's an asset. Your clothes. If you think you don't have assets, go through any community in the spring and fall, and what do you see? Yard signs. And what are people selling? Their belongings, their assets. So that means you put value on your 5-acre farm. Is it going to have the same value monetarily as the 5,000-acre farm? No. But to you, this is your asset. This is your number one asset. And think about that as a protection. How do I protect this? Well, you protect it by making sure that you have a will and making sure that your will is up to date. If you want to pass it to the next generation, you have a farm transition plan. All children and all land are not equal. Repeat, all children and all land are not equal. So just because somebody's the firstborn doesn't entitle them to anything other than saying, I'm the firstborn. The greatest gift of love that you can give your family is to have your affairs in order. Have a will. Have a will that makes sense. Don't say, I leave all my assets equally to all my children. What does that mean? Nothing. So that's another way we can protect rural America, is to begin to look at asset protection and how do we transfer these assets from generation to generation. With urban America, we could help them appreciate the value of rural America by educating them. When people had land, they ate. They lived a little bit healthier. We've got to be able to figure out how everybody can make an honest living. I know that there are always going to be more people who make more than other people. We put value on that. But every life is valuable. There is no reason why in one of the richest countries in the world we have hungry people. There is no reason why in one of the richest countries in the world we have homeless people. We have a free education system. There's no reason why somebody graduates from high school and can't read. Our education system is free. Let's step back a minute and reevaluate. We need some doctors of soil science. We need some doctors of husbandry that can look at a cow and say what's wrong with them. We need somebody that can say this is a seasonal high tunnel, but if we do X, Y, and Z, we can grow in this seasonal high tunnel 12 months out of the year, and we can provide X amount of fresh food, vegetables, fruit, whatever, to our communities. We need to look inwardly a little bit more at our communities. I'm babbling.
Well, those are all some really good suggestions, and I don't know. I just have my ideas and my thoughts from my work.
One of my favorite times as a child growing up outside in Maryland was because of the hurricane season, or when it rained. I loved that hour and a half before the storm hit, when the trees would be blowing and it looked like the leaves turned inside out. The air smelled differently. I love the smell of freshly tilled soil.
Me too. And when they turn the peanuts in the fall, oh my gosh.
And I love the smell of the forest just before a storm comes. The air changes something. Like
you can smell it.
And you can feel it different. Mm-hmm. It's different on your skin.
Your hair stands up. And
I burn wood all winter. There's nothing like a wood stove, because then your bones get warm. And as you get old, you need warm bones. Even when the fire goes out, it's not an instant cold. When the furnace shuts it off, 2 seconds later, the room is cold. And I have been known, even when the lights are on, to just light the oil lamp.
I love the oil lamps.
And I have, I've been known to sit in a chair with a book and an oil lamp.
How lovely. What a way to reconnect with just a slower...
It slows down. Now, it's a little bit crazy to everybody else in my family. And
same here. I understand. I'm with you.
But, I'm known to be crazy. So
I like you're kind of crazy.
Hey, you drive a hybrid.
I do drive a hybrid.
No, I'm good. We're going to get on the road. And
okay. Well,
thank you so much to Ebony Alexander, the Virginia Humanities, Healthy Suffolk, and thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts at amydrury@gmail.com.